Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode here on the Command Post cohort. I want to introduce this episode. It's going to be a little bit different than our regularly scheduled programming. This episode is going to be an excerpt from a couple weeks ago. Andrew was out in Austin, Texas for another recording of the monthly Military Connected Mentor Meetup. That's a live podcast we do, co-hosted with Startup Anthology. There at the Capital Factory in Austin. And so for June, in recognition of June 12th being Women's Veterans Day, had Johanna Wynne join both Andrew and Jeremy there to discuss her journey from being a leader in the military and then coming out and working in the startup world, and shared some insights with her perspective. So it's a really great episode. So I hope you all will listen to this and enjoy it. And we do these every month out in Austin. So if you are in that area, feel free to reach out to us. We'll make sure we get you linked up with the time and location and everything. Always feel free to reach out to us either through social media or our website, commandpostcohort.com, and also outsiders-group.com. Either way, you can get a hold of us there. Y'all enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Military Connected Monthly Mentorship Meetup. I'm Jeremy Willis. I'm a Navy veteran. I started a company called Startup Anthology about a year ago. So that's kind of me. We're not at our normal location. No, we're at Capital Factory, but this week they have some event going on. So we're over here tonight at the Pershing House. So part of the thing that we do is we do a crossover episode between Startup Anthology podcast and Command Cohort. That's Andrew. And so tonight is Johanna Wynne. And just thank you all for being here tonight. Just want to shout out a couple of the sponsors. We have IVMF Bunker Labs, Texas Veterans Commission.
Texas Veterans Commission, Combined Arms.
Texas Veterans Network. So we'll just go and get started. So the way we do this is just conversational. So so that's the way we're going to do it. And then about 30 minutes of recording and a conversation, and then we'll do kind of like a guided networking thing at the end.
Johanna, welcome and thank you for being our wonderful guest this evening. Why don't you tell us kind of your journey through the Army, coming out of the Army, and then into the startup world?
Sure. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It's awesome to see folks come out and support. And I was born into an Army family in Fulda, Germany, height of the Cold War. I'm sure the Fulda Gap rings a bell for many or some of you. And from there, moved about 10 times before the age of 14. Ended up in Washington, D.C. at a very competitive and crazy all-girls school. That's another podcast in and of itself.
Another episode.
That's not something we can cover here.
Nope. And my dad was in the Army, so that makes sense. But ended up declining my dad's alma mater at West Point to go to the University of Vermont, which was my rebellious act. But I did ROTC there, and I was able to swim there, and found myself commissioned into the military intelligence branch, where I served for 20 years, 3 deployments, and had the fortune of being part of the plank holders at Army Futures Command. So one of the first 100 folks who helped get that command up and running. So a lot of interesting lessons from that experience. And then, much like they advise you not to do, I jumped right into work. They say, take your time, figure out who you are, spend some time really thinking about your values and your passion. There's nothing wrong if you find the perfect match to jump right into the next chapter. I was recruited by an entrepreneur and his startup, which at the time was very enticing. And this we can get into some of the specifics later. But long story short, he had a vision for me to be in a very specific role for the city of Austin. And unfortunately, while the work looked promising in terms of the contract being awarded, it wasn't awarded. So I came on board as overhead and was working to learn the business, and then that contract never came through. So I think that's a great lesson in joining the startup world, right? Like, that's a risk that he took and a risk that I took. I actually did a skill bridge with Dell and had something lined up there, which was also, very solid. But the startup opportunity was really exciting, and I really thought that I would have an opportunity to make an impact. And I could get into specifics, but long story short, I think that's part of the game, right? You have to take some risks, and in this case, it didn't necessarily work out, but I learned a lot in the process, and I think that's kind of how I found myself in the startup space, and am now just exploring what that means in terms of next. What's that?
It means to be free.
Yeah. I'm a free agent.
Yeah, free agent. Well, I wanted to go back a little bit, and you talked about the beginning of your story is like you didn't go to West Point, and you grew up Army. Your dad went to West Point. You had an appointment to West Point. Why did you not take it?
Yeah. So I visited a number of times. I went to the week-long leadership camp between your junior and senior year, and it's a beautiful place. And every time I visit there, I'm inspired, and I'm proud that my father went there. And it was a really hard decision to say no. And I joke that it was rebellion, but in truth, it really was my way to say, I've got to figure this path out for myself, and that it made a lot of sense for my dad to encourage me to go there. But every decision up to that point really had been made by the Army. And
your whole life, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
From birth, you were in Deers like as soon as you
exactly,
were born.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was
-3.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I couldn't wait to get my ID card at age 10. I mean,
Really?
that was a big deal. But yeah, I visited, and I didn't feel like it was the place for me. And I knew that by me going, I was denying someone else who really did feel like it was a place for them to go. And I wanted to chart, my own path. And ironically, ended up staying in for a full career, which none of my West Point colleagues ended up staying in for 20 years. Not that that makes any difference, but I found my own way, and that was important. And my dad was disappointed, but he denies that he was ever disappointed. So.
Well, I mean, you still went in the Army, right?
Right.
So you still were a cadet in the ROTC,
right.
And so you still got a commission. So, I mean, there's maybe a little bit of time. He's like, oh, come on. But then you ultimately had a 20-year career.
Yeah,
so.
No, absolutely. And I feel kind of blessed to have the best of both worlds, and that the West Point community and family is so strong that just by my father being an academy grad, I feel like his class was so supportive of me, and so I really benefited from that special alumni network in a different way.
So why did you end up joining the Army? Like, why did you end up going to the ROTC? Is that a guilt because you didn't go to West Point, or was it?
I mean, there was a little bit of compromise there,
Okay,
right? I
yeah.
definitely think that because I moved around so much and was sort of creating, or not necessarily creating a new identity anywhere I went, it was sort of survival, right? Like, what are the conditions that I'm faced with in Fort Polk, Louisiana versus
A lot of things.
right, versus living in Central America, and like very different worlds, and yet they were butted up against each other. And so at a young age, you're kind of just in survival mode, but not realizing that you're in survival mode. And I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do next, and because my dad felt comfortable mentoring me into the Army family, it felt like a fairly safe choice, right? Which is kind of ironic because a lot of people, what? Join the Army? That's not safe.
Well,
but
something you knew.
right,
It was
right,
safe for you.
right. For
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
it was
Yeah.
it's just what you did,
Familiar.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly, following in his footsteps. It's certainly what I knew. My sister, this is funny. She did a semester of ROTC. Said not for me, and ended up joining the Peace Corps, which service is service.
It's the same, really.
Let's say, yeah.
Same.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, service runs deep in the family, and that was how she expressed it. But I heard a number of, oh, Heather doesn't know what she's giving up by not doing ROTC, and this, that, the other, and so I took that, absorbed that, and was the obedient daughter.
Are you the oldest one?
I'm actually the youngest.
The youngest one,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's
Are you
interesting.
number 3? I'm number
No,
3.
I'm two. I'm
Oh,
two. Only
see.
two.
They're babies. They're the rebellious ones.
But they're 6.5 years apart from us, and
I
they
see.
say that that's like two only children. I don't know.
So you said it was kind of like your rebellious act, right? Not going to West Point. So do you think there are parallels, perhaps, between like a rebellious act, choosing not going to West Point, choosing not going and working for Dell? Is there any similarities in that?
You know, I hadn't thought of that, but I do think that there's something to be said about something inside of me that is interested in exploring what's possible outside of what society says should be the way. Choosing a harder route potentially, not that that's the best thing to do, but something that I can make my mark on, I think has always sort of intrigued me. I mean, that's an interesting thing that I need to journal about one day.
I think it's interesting too that you've made two big decisions, right? It was to go to University of Vermont, and that was not the norm. And then it was to do a startup, work at the startup here in town, and do the Dell thing. So it's like there's like these two big milestones of things happening. And in fact, just like our pre-interview we were talking about, you did a startup in the Army with Army Futures Command being a plank holder, which I didn't realize. I was a plank holder for the USS North Carolina, the shipyard in Virginia. So I kind of know what that's like.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? What was the going there of being really, really early on at a brand new command?
Yeah. So it was super exciting. General Murray, who was the first commander of Army Futures Command, used to joke, but there was so much truth to it, that we were a startup in the middle of a major merger acquisition, because there was so much that had to be figured out in Austin, and in terms of how the organization was going to wrap their arms around the thousands of people and the dozens of organizations that had some role in modernizing our Army. And I would say the energy in downtown Austin was palpable. Everyone was excited about the potential to do things differently, to break down silos, to cut through red tape, to figure out new ways of doing things, because collectively the Army leadership had agreed that the old ways of doing business weren't working. What was really interesting, having been there at first as part of the Intelligence and Security Directorate, and then later as a support battalion commander, was watching the turnover. So people that were initially assigned to Army Futures Command as a task force were very deliberately selected to be part of this new thing that was going to require a lot of comfort in discomfort, that were willing to work against the ways things have always been done.
So not big Army.
Right. In fact, we had this acculturation process, which is a week long, and we initially were going to go by first names at Army Futures Command, which
Wow.
yeah,
That's a big deal.
exactly.
I didn't know I had a first name, and I just wrote that out to qualify. Yeah.
So General Murray was comfortable to the point of being called like General Mike. You know, even that was like, what? It didn't make sense. And we're conventional, right? It's not the special forces. We were a conventional unit. So this idea was really foreign to a lot of people. And I remember having a major disagreement with a sergeant major one of the first weeks I was there, because he just thought this was the most disrespectful thing ever. Like, people had worked for their rank and they deserved to be called, you know, Sergeant First Class this or General that. And my thought was like, hey, we got to buy into this, right? Like, if we're going to do things differently and we're going to build a different culture, we got to be all in. And so we eventually came to terms, but that was an illustration of a lot of the conflict I think that many people had. Some were totally all in, and others came to Austin because there was a lot of hiring happening. People thought, hey, this is a great place for me to retire, and they need people. They weren't necessarily bought into the concept, they just saw the opportunities. So there was this interesting clash of people who were totally committed to a new way, and then folks that were excellent in doing well in the Army that we knew, and not necessarily the organization that we were driving to move toward.
Yeah. It's like it crept back in.
Yeah.
Despite your rebellious first name.
Right. Yeah, well, right. And
do they still do that there?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. No. And I would say that with every PCS, people would come and say, what the heck? What are you guys doing? You know, and there was some truth to it, right? Like, we went so far left of what was traditionally accepted in the halls of the Pentagon that we were misunderstood completely. Like, we had just different names for standard functions. And so we thought we were being innovative, and the Pentagon was like, what are you talking about? Like, you guys are operations, stop calling it what was it called? Yes, exactly. We created new names for things that were really not novel, but by putting a new name on it.
Got a new name.
Right, exactly.
It's not G1, it's
right.
human capital.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the Pentagon was like, what is human capital? I mean, we get it, but you're G1. So there was all sorts of conflict on that front.
That's a very interesting point, because I feel like that's like kind of back to the rebellious point as well there. So I also like that you brought up, we got to buy into this, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of overlap with that in the startup community as well, right? Because if you're at the speak at this point, Jeremy, because
Okay.
I've not been in a startup.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to be that way, right? You have to be leaning forward and be entirely in it. Do you feel like there was similarities there as well?
No, absolutely. I think that sort of mirroring my experience at Army Futures Command against my startup experience, I feel that I was really excited about the idea of doing things differently in the Army, because I saw throughout my career that a lot of activities and decisions were made without a whole lot of questioning of why we're doing it. We're doing it this way because we've always done it this way.
Groupthink.
Right.
Yeah.
And Army Futures Command was really committed to not doing that. but it did require a certain amount of buy-in and passion to that end. Now, the startup that I joined, I was very interested in learning more about, but it wasn't my startup, right? Like I found my way into it because this individual saw potential in me to help serve his mission, and I sort of convinced myself that I could be bought in, but over time realized how important it really is to be passionate about what you are doing, because if you're not, you start to see the cracks, I think, a lot sooner, right? You start to see, why are we doing it this way? And, you just, I don't know, you're not willing to compromise, I think, as much as when you're fully vested, and you start comparing it to other experiences rather than maybe just trying to trailblaze your way through under these startup conditions.
Okay.
How did you're talking about the start off first names and then now obviously not. What was else happened in that transition as Army Futures Command started the clash, the different people that are there that comes in from like
Sure.
DC or they're only
Yeah.
thinking about their next rank instead of
Sure.
like innovation and trying to figure out how to make the Army better.
I think it's human nature to default to what you know. And if you are not part of that initial excitement, there needs to be a deliberate effort to bridge the gap, right? If you're coming from a conventional organization and then you fall upon something that doesn't look like what you're accustomed to, if there's not a conversation that says, hey, we're still figuring it out, this isn't perfect, but this is the way that we're doing it now, and this is why we're doing it this way, and we need your help to make it even better, then the frustration of the inevitable challenges of a startup compared with the comfort of the way things have always been done, and maybe they're not the best way, but they made sense within the context of the organization that I came from, and I could see how it could apply here. It's really, I just think it's human nature to fall back on your own system. So I use the example of just like a CRM or even dialing it back to SharePoint. Like if you don't have systems that help flatten information, everyone's going to default to the attachment on the email. It's just like the easy way, right? And then your knowledge management is totally busted, and there's silos. So it's just one example of things I saw that we had so much potential, and yet we had actually regressed in a lot of capability that was available in other parts of the Army simply because we were also new that we ended up reverting back to things that were just sort of the path of least resistance. And that became more and more the case, I think, as folks came in that weren't part of that initial energy. But I think that has changed over time, and I think there's probably people in this room that could argue that Army Futures Command, you probably, has kind of found its rhythm a bit more. But I sort of left at a time where there was a clash there in terms of, innovative trailblazers and older guard coming in to question
And you
how
can
crazy
neither
we were.
confirm nor deny.
Yeah, that sounds like a great chance to change topics.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and now the model is completely. I mean, it's not thrown away, but I feel for the organization in that there's a whole new challenge ahead with the merger of TRADOC and AFC, right? So all of this incredible investment in
about
what
old school
what
Army
was.
and new
But
Army.
I mean, I think in terms of the notion of being adaptive and being comfortable with discomfort, like I don't know that you could get more uncomfortable than the conditions that are now faced by AFC and TRADOC, right?
Yeah.
And so the people that have been there plank holders that are still there, hopefully will be more seasoned and open to dealing with this next curveball, maybe?
So
Okay.
now for something completely
Yeah,
different.
something completely different.
We're going
moving
to
right
take a
along.
hard left here.
Yeah.
We can edit that out too.
So, with your experience, almost really in 2 startups, right, outside and inside, so to speak, tell me about Legos.
Oh, goodness. So when we were having just a quick conversation about whether or not this would be a good fit, I was reminded of an article by a woman named Molly Graham, and she worked at Facebook and I want to say, a couple of other major tech startups, and now is doing her Google, yes.
Google.
And she really became an expert in rapid scaling of organizations, and she created a analogy related to scaling, dealing with Legos. So imagine you've got this great project, building this amazing tower of Legos, and yet you're wearing multiple hats, you're doing all the things. The project is starting to get higher and higher, and as you're managing all these elements of building this thing, you realize that you need more help. So you start bringing people on, and other people start playing with your Legos, and the more they start playing with your Legos, the less comfortable you are with giving your Legos away. And rather than sort of embracing this newfound help that you have, you can feel almost like a kid. Hey, give me back my toys. Like I know how to build this thing, and this is my tower of Legos. And what she offers is that by sharing your Legos, by divesting some of the responsibility that you initially had in building your Legos, you're able to focus on the next game or the next opportunity. So having a comfort in not just delegation, but really focusing on more strategic roles so that you have the bandwidth to take your organization to the next level, to truly help scale it. Because if you're focused down and in and where the next piece goes on the Legos, you're not thinking about the next building that you can build. And I did find a little bit of that tension in the startup that I was a part, because I was someone who was new, had a lot of energy, had a lot of experience, and I was wanting to play with the Legos. And I'm not sure that that they were totally ready, right? So you have to be ready to scale, I think. And
Okay.
So
It's not a quiz.
well, I don't know. I just think, we had candid conversations. He really felt like he was on the precipice of wanting to build more and build faster and control what was known success, right? And so I think you do have to, again, take the leap, take the risk. Am I willing to let some things go so that I truly can focus on the things that are going to take my organization to the next level? And if I don't have comfort with other people playing with my Legos, then I'm gonna maintain my Legos, and they can go play somewhere else. And so, her recommendation is give folks opportunities that are, and goals that are big and ambitious and help focus on the future, so that the bandwidth of thinking about their previous tasks or the multiple hats that they wore are less their focus, and they're really focused on that next chapter.
He's taking more notes.
I am.
Yeah.
So to me, that sounds a lot like, as you're very much in control of your Legos. You have the vision of how you want to see things and how they're supposed to be done. And as you grow the startup and bring on more people, there's a level of trust that has to be conveyed to the new hire that number one, you're going to allow them to do things that the way they want to do things in accordance kind of with your left and right limits. And then it's like a two-way street there, right? Because you have to trust them that they can do it, and they have to trust you that you're not going to
pull it back.
pull it back.
Sure.
That to allow you to, like you said, do kind of allow you more bandwidth to continue to scale and grow the business.
Sure. And I think, back to the original wrinkle that I described,
Original wrinkle.
be willing to, or have a plan B if you don't win that work that you brought the person on to do, right? Like you have to have a deliberate goal for them and help them pivot into something else. So just as your environment changes, what are the expectations of the people that you're wanting to give Legos to, but maybe have a little apprehension of, and if the blueprint for what you're building changes, how ready are you to embrace them working on other projects that maybe initially you weren't envisioning them having their hands in. And so I think, to his credit, realizing that the work wasn't one, although there maybe could have been some more transparency in how we approach the next steps. I think he realized that it wasn't necessarily going to be a great fit, and he made the decision early on-ish to, for us to talk and say, hey, this didn't work out as we imagined. And that's a hard conversation. It's a hard thing. I know that he was a veteran, so he felt, some responsibility for recruiting me and kind of pitching this idea of his company, and then it didn't manifest. So that was a hard thing, I'm sure. And actually one of the points that Molly Graham gives, not necessarily specific to my experience, but communicating early and often roles and expectations, and when it's clear that it's not going to be a good fit,
Find out fast.
do everybody a favor, right? And it's painful, but it's better to make that hard decision to go and part ways than force something that isn't going to work out.
It's because you're so rebellious.
That might be part of it.
So looking back on your career, and I guess, what are 3 big major lessons that you've learned? Your takeaways.
3 big life lessons. I think first that life is short, that it's not guaranteed, that we have a lot of tremendous opportunity, and to not take that for granted. That isn't necessarily aligned with my military career, but some other things that have happened personally in my life. So that's something that motivates me moving forward, is living for those that I lost, that my husband lost in our family. So we've felt that very intimately. So do it now. Don't wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow is not promised, and really listen. I guess to point 2. There is something inside each one of us that speaks to what we want to do or who we are, and culture, society, the world can drown out some of that voice if you, by means of survival, have to allow it to drown out a bit, or you just take the path of least resistance. But I think that if I had to, I don't know, I wouldn't do anything differently, but really tuning into that inner dialogue and knowing that
paying attention.
Exactly. Like listen to it.
Following your gut.
It's hard, right? With the military, that sort of strips you of that identity. Once you come out of the service, being able to turn the volume up on that inner voice can be really challenging, and That's sort of what I'm exploring big time right now.
It's. I remember when I got out, it was like, how do I even do this? They had a manual for this, you know.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I don't know what I'm doing. You mean to fix that? Cool. Where's the manual? Oh, we don't have one.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So what's one more lesson? And then out of those 3 lessons, what would you have told the younger Joanne?
Oh, younger Joanna. I don't know that I would have listened to. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, in that, I mean, even in watching my own children, there's a lot of skinning of your knees that you have to do for the lessons to really stick.
Yeah.
And I remember, my mom and dad both telling me, I know what you're going through. I know how hard this is. And me responding, no, you don't understand. Of course you don't know what I'm going through. And now as the parent, now as the adult, like seeing my son struggle with things that I know are going to get better, that just through the repetitions of life experience, you can get through. But it's those first and second times that you're faced with really difficult things that you sometimes don't feel like you're going to get through. So
Right.
I guess giving advice to my younger self would just be like, write it out, feel the things,
Yeah.
learn from it. How are
Life's
you going to,
short.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
This happened. What are you going to learn from it? How are you going to make the most of it moving forward?
I think that's a big thing, because failure is a great motivator and a teacher. Because if you're always winning, you don't know why sometimes. So, but when you fail, oh, I did that and that didn't work. It's not necessarily my fault or not, but I won't do that again.
Sure.
So-
Well, I will share that, like, in this period of sort of self-discovery and reflection, you read a lot of books, you listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's certainly a theme that comes up, right? Like,
Yeah.
the most successful people are those that have just continually failed and have not let that stop them. They've dusted themselves off and figured out how to pivot, how to maneuver, how to learn, how to take that scar to make it hurt less the next time, right? Like, it's just relentless pursuit of their vision.
Yeah, resiliency.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Which the Army teaches you a lot of, but it's not necessarily yours to own. And I think as a startup, there's this responsibility that is so tremendous, that you have to really trust yourself, that failure is just one of the ingredients to success.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn over for some Q&A.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions about the conversation for Johanna or myself or Andrew?
Nope, not for me.
Not for you. Yeah. He was taking notes the whole time.
So busy writing.
If no questions, we could just go around and then just introduce. Oh, sorry.
I'll ask.
There you go.
Sure.
There we
Break
are.
the ice.
Yeah, it sounded like a lot of your experiences were sort of universal and not like gender specific, but I'm curious. I know the transition period is hard for a lot of people. I struggled with it really bad the first time around. And so as a woman, do you think it's different transitioning out, like going into as you go into those first
Sure.
jobs?
Let me interrupt real quick. What's your name?
Ted Baker.
Ted Baker. Cool. Make sure you introduce yourself. Okay.
So Ted, that's a very thoughtful question, and I appreciate you asking that. I don't know if you knew that tomorrow is Women Veterans Day, but very apropos to point that out. And I would say that yes, I can't speak from the position of a man, right? But one of the things that has struck me most, which I was not prepared for, is as a woman in the service, you just by ratios are very visible. You are one of 20, or your work sometimes, whether true or untrue, and depending on who is evaluating it, can be looked through the lens of not just being a lieutenant, for example, but a female. So I remember as a lieutenant, I felt like when I made a mistake, it wasn't because I was a lieutenant. All lieutenants make mistakes. I felt it was because I was a woman sometimes. So I just felt I felt like a heightened sense of scrutiny and attention while I was in the service. Coming out of the service, I felt that my service was far less visible than a man's service and what people think when they consider what a veteran is. And so you go from being like kind of spotlighted to almost not reduced, that's not the right word, but you don't fit the mold of what a veteran is, and you almost have to really more aggressively advocate for the fact that you served too. You did the thing that the guy did, right? Like, and people will often assume when my husband and I are out that he was the veteran, right? It's just the sort of the nature of the beast, I guess. And so it can be tiring to sort of have to I don't know, really advocate for yourself in a way that I don't know that male veterans have to in the same way. So I think that would be sort of the biggest thing that I have found that is something that I wasn't anticipating or expecting. But I will also share that I've been blown away by the amount of women that also feel that way and want to come together to create space to address that and find community. In fact, Jenny in this room is a founder of a startup that does just that. And I think that women are finding their ways to those communities to help mitigate that struggle.
As always, take these lessons, use them, and spread them. Everyone is welcome in the cohort.
Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more, and drop us a line at commandpostcohort.com to request a specific topic.
We'll see you next time on the cohort.